So hi and welcome to all of you. I'm Estefania Teran, on Think Tank's director. We highly appreciate your time, especially because some of you, like Javier from Etos in Mexico, had to set up an alarm. It is early in the morning. And for others, such as Ryan from Ideas Malaysia, might be probably counting the minutes to go to bed. And this diversity is reflected in the edition of the State of the Sector report. This annual overview of the think tank sector worldwide is based on data from a global survey using the Open Think Tanks directory, database, and information provided by 21 partner organizations that are with us today. There are a lot of new features in this edition, and for instance, we have delved deep into the political and financial context to understand how these factors influence think tanks' organizational independence and levels of policy impact. We also investigate think tanks' engagement with emerging trends such as artificial intelligence and also diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. There are significant differences in adopting these approaches within high and low income countries. We will see. But I must flag, though, that some of these findings we will share with you today might resonate or not with you, and others might be counterintuitive. We are also aware that we will still need to strengthen our sample so that it is more representative of the sector and for some regions more than others, but we are on it. However, the key value of this open survey data and its publication lies in the accompanying opportunity we provide to actors within the ecosystem to discuss and debate its findings. This publication should be seen as a tool in the broader process, whereby actors are invited, as today, to compare the local realities with the global data, generate nuanced analysis, and discuss questions that are critical for the sector for its sustainability and future success. And this is the official discussion, we would say, between the actors involved very close within this process, but we have already had some discussions in other spaces and you will organize some more. So that's the purpose. And with no further comments, I would like to mention the last new feature. We invited a lead author this time so that he could bring his ideas, assumptions, and also expertise to this effort. The author I'm really happy to introduce today is Marcos González Hernando. He is from Chile, an honorary research fellow at UCL Social Research Institute, a postdoctoral researcher at the Universidad Diego Portales, and an adjunct researcher at the Center for Study of the Social Conflict and Cohesion. He holds a PhD in sociology from the University of Cambridge, and Marcos has experience working in universities and think tanks in Latin America and Europe, and he will share his input about this process. Welcome, Marcos.
Thanks so much, Estefania. First of all, thanks for the opportunity. It was a pleasure, and I've learned a lot through the process, and I think we, at the moment, have a really interesting and novel instrument to gauge to what extent think tanks vary across the world. I will start talking a bit about because Estefania asked me to come up with some overall narrative or some overall, at least, approach to this project, what I came up with. So in the literature on think tanks and in the literature on policy research in general, you'll find that there are certain sort of theological assumptions, if you will, about how the world operates and how funding, for instance, impacts how think tanks and policy impact works. So what I wanted to do is, in some sense, to prove null hypotheses. What do I mean by this? I mean that, for example, and these are all statements that are going to be very broad, even, I hope not insulting, but very broad, but very much ingrained assumptions about how funding and about how, and the differences between wealthy and less wealthy nations. So, for example, countries that that are wealthier will probably have less funding coming from international sources. That kind of basic assumption. Another basic assumption could be, for instance, that and this is related to core and project-based funding, which is at the center of this particular report, is that core-based funding meaning funding that is directed directly to the organization itself rather than through a particular project, is going to mean that things are a bit more secure and are able to plan for the future, for example. Because a part of this report as well is focused on politics, we needed also to find a way to basically classify countries as well, and classify the ways that and operationalize the ways in which politics and the political climate in these particularly polarizing times has affected think tanks. So for that, and also for the issue of how wealthy a country is, we decided to externalize these questions. There might be, this is a work in progress, of course, and there might be very reasonable critiques of why we picked these, but we picked the World Bank classification of countries between low, middle, high, middle, and high income countries, and the VDEM varieties of democracy classification of countries from autocracies to liberal democracies. And also without considering also that the think tanks that we surveyed are from all over the world, from very different contexts. We also tried to guarantee as much as possible their anonymity. We created actually with 1111, a consulting firm that helped us through the process, a system through which the anonymity would be guaranteed to try and mitigate any biases that may appear in relation to that, or any self-selection or social desirability bias that could come from that. Ultimately, then, what we tried to do, and as Camila will show later, was to try and test these very basic assumptions, very general assumptions about how think tanks in wealthy countries or less wealthy countries will operate, or in more or less democratic nations. Another innovation that we have this year is that we basically spent a lot of time discussing over how to divide the world, right? Because we wanted to give you insights as deep as possible in your particular area, but in your particular area of the world. At the same time, however, whatever way that we decide to split the world is going to be arbitrary, and we're going to basically put together things that are countries that are completely different. So for that, and in account of the many different factors that will affect how think tanks operate, particularly institutional traditions, geography, culture, degrees of development, etc., we decided to take the UN SDGs regional groups as a basis, but from there, we made some innovations. So for example, probably the three most important are that for the case of Europe and North America, that generally are just considered one big group, we divided it between the Anglosphere, which would include the US, Canada, UK, Australia, and New Zealand, the EU, and the non-EU Europe plus the Caucasus, partly because of mainly basically actually because of the different institutional traditions and the kinds of funding that you're likely to find there. And you will see throughout the results that Camila will show you now some of the differences between these groups. Thank you. And with that, I think, Camila, it's your turn.
Thank you, Marcos, for your presentation. The team and I appreciated our long discussions and exchanges during this process that led to this report, and we are really grateful for all the added value you brought. You will be able to ask Marcos questions afterwards, so please write them in the chat so that our team can process them for the speakers. Now, I want to introduce you to Camila Ulloa, the Research and Project Officer at On Think Tanks, who will present the report's main findings. Camila.
Thank you, Stefania. I'm just going to share my screen. Let me know if you see my screen. Is it okay?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. No. Now?
There you are.
Great. So do you see it? Yeah. I just want to be sure.
Yes.
Yes, Camila.
Okay. So good morning. Good morning, everyone. I'm in Quito, Ecuador, so it's my morning. Thank you, all of you, for joining us today from different time zones. I am very excited to present and share with you the main findings from the own think tank State of the Sector report of this year. And as Marcos already said a little bit, this report is going to provide a global snapshot of the think tank sector, examining some challenges, opportunities in a world marked by political shifts. I will guide you through the key insights, including the sector's composition, funding challenges, impact drivers, and opportunities for growth. I encourage you to download the report, scan the QR, go to this link and explore not only the report, but also the data and also the insights that our local partners develop. I'm going to start talking a little bit about the research methodology and the data. And this survey was distributed to a contact list of more than 2,000 individuals representing think tanks across all regions. So as Marcos already said, the findings are based on a global survey conducted with 297 valid responses from 95 countries. The survey included 54 questions and gathered inputs from think tanks across all regions, ensuring diversity. However, it's important to note some limitations about the data. While the sample is really extensive, it may not fully represent the global population of think tanks. But the data is really useful to identify some trends, some regional variations, and also some systemic challenges that are shaping the sector today. So what is the average think tank responded, size, age, and turnover? I'm going to talk a little bit about the sector overview and the operational structure. Over 60% of think tanks in our sample operate with budgets under 500,000 and has fewer than 20 staff members. Also, we found that leadership is predominantly male, except in some regions like Latin America and the Caribbean, where female representation is stronger. Also, staff in think tanks are typically professional aged 35 and older. And we also found that most think tanks are registered as non-profits and maintain a core set of functions, of functional capacities like communication and governance, but other areas like monitoring, evaluation, and learning, and fundraising remain still rare inside things. We also analyze the political context that think tanks are living in, and one of the most encouraging findings in this report is that globally, nearly 65% of think tanks surveyed state that they can conduct research mostly or completely independently. Independence is crucial for maintaining credibility and trust with the stakeholders. So this is an encouraging finding. However, the report reveals that this level of independence doesn't necessarily correlate or relate with the type of political regime. That's a contra-intuitive finding that we show here, because think tanks in less democratic contexts report similar levels of research freedom as those in democratic countries. Also, we analyze and we find a key challenge in this report, that it's polarization. Polarization restricts think tanks' ability to engage with diverse stakeholders, limiting access to broader perspectives and funding sources. And also, we found that in more polarized environments, think tanks report experiencing less independence in conducting or publishing research. So higher levels of polarizations tend to correlate with lower independence. That's something that we found here. When we talk a little bit, when we talk about how pessimistic and optimistic think tanks are about the political situation, we found that globally, 37% of the think tanks expect unfavorable political outcomes in the coming year. While this might seem significant, it is an improvement compared to last year, where 51% anticipate negative outcomes. We saw that high-income countries with liberal democracies stand out for their pessimism, with only 21% expecting favorable outcomes, political outcomes, reflecting uncertainties in their own context. There are notable differences across regions. For example, think tanks in Europe and Anglosphere and Latin America and the Caribbean remain the least optimistic. On the other hand, the MENA region and the Sub-Saharan Africa show a more positive outlook. I'm going to pass to our next topic, that is about funding and why core funding is critical for think tanks' success. So in the report, we found that in high-income countries, domestic funding predominates, supporting also larger budgets. Meanwhile, in low-income contexts, think tanks depend heavily on international funding. And when we analyze specific core funding, we also found that core funding is scarce, especially in low and lower middle income countries. Only 18% of think tanks report receiving core funding, while 52% rely mostly or entirely on project-based funding. And this over-reliance on project-based funding it limits the ability of the think tanks to cover indirect costs, to sustaining long-term staff, and also to invest in strategic initiatives. So we found that core funding is a key factor for all these aspects: to cover indirect costs, to sustain a long-term staff, to diversify also their outputs, and to enhance more in policy impact. When we analyze the key drivers behind the think tank impacts, we have this finding that it's that globally 77% of think tanks report having a policy impact. That's a big number. And when we ask them to report what is their main audience, the public sector remains the main audience for many of think tanks, followed by the general public, but also research communities. Also, think tanks reported that government bodies and policymakers are the most influential actors in shaping research agendas. We also analyzed the main policy issues that think tanks are prioritizing this year. And economics continues to predominate in the countries globally. As you can see, this is the same topic that was prioritized last year. There was a different category, but you can see that it's the same. It's the top three of the main policy issues from this year are the same for last year: economics, governance, and international affairs and relations maintain these top three policy issues. Also, we analyze we analyze several factors that can influence think tanks' ability to impact on policy. And we can see that some aspects about organizational capacity are related to the capacity to impact on policy, such as larger budgets, also having long-term staff, are correlated with higher political impact. The funding source is also one of the elements that can be related to policy impact. The political regime and the country income are not direct related to the policy impact of a think tank. The media receptiveness, yes, it's we can see that in a more in an environment with more media receptiveness, the think tanks can have better impact on policy. And polarization needs a negative relation. I mean, when there are more polarized environments, it's related with less impact on policy. And when we analyze the challenges and the capacity gaps in the think tank sector, we found that adaptability is one of the main challenges. Also funding. Funding remains one of the critical challenges. And also we found that adaptability focused on the need for flexibility in navigating all these political and economic shifts. 59% of think tanks cite that funding is a significant concern. And this is quite similar to last year where financial issues and fundraising was the main challenge for think tanks. And when we analyze the capacity needs, 66% of think tanks indicate that they need an improvement in fundraising. This is also something that appears last year, not in the top one, but also in the main capacity needs that think tanks were looking for. But here, this year, fundraising is the main capacity need that think tanks are identifying, followed by communications and marketing and research capacities, and also innovation and adaptability. So to conclude, and in summary, think tanks face a complex mix of challenges, opportunities, and to remain impactful, the sector must prioritize addressing some funding gaps, as we can see, adapting also to polarized environments, and investing also in capacity building and innovation. We also, in this year, we also include some questions about emerging trends, such as the inclusion of diversity, equity, and inclusion policies on the organizations. And we found this, that better resource think tanks are leading the way in implementing these policies. And also we include some questions about artificial intelligence use. And we found that AI usage is still limited, but is growing. And the use of AI is primarily in communication rather than research or operational processes. But yeah, you can see more about these two emerging trends topics in the report. I encourage you all to download the report and check all the findings of this year's survey. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Camila. We really appreciate your concise and also clear presentation, but also the significant data analysis supported that you did support and that you provide. So thank you so much. And also, if you have any questions for Camila, please write them also in the chat, and we will manage afterwards in the end. And now, this is also a very important time in this meeting where we invite you as our partners to share your reactions and thoughts about the report's main findings. The main question is, do they make any sense to you? Is it the case for your region, your country, or organization? And We have organized the intervention into three main topics: political, funding, and impact. And also among our partners who wrote an analysis of the report based on the survey data. So please use the time assigned. A timer will help you to track it. I will start now with the political context, calling ASSET, the African Center for Equitable Development from Benin in the Sub-Saharan Africa. Ariel, please, or Rodriguez.
Thank you, Estefania. I just want to add a key insight from our work, particularly on political aspects. We want to say that the key challenge faced by African think tanks in African context are firstly restrictive environments. In particular country, we have a censorship measure that forbids to criticize government action. Secondly, we have in some country political instability that we can explain by frequent regime change. These changements not allow to have a long-term engagement with policy actors, with policy makers, with actors who play a key role in government. Lastly, but not least, we can also underline that in some countries we have also limited political will, because the topic that think tanks work on, particularly we have some actors that have different interests because they have their political agenda and they work on that. When we make the survey, we also remark that some think tanks recognize that the political conditions are negatively impact their work within the last year. They are not important, but we have just 30%. Furthermore, government intolerance for criticism and the perceived illegitimacy of non-profit organizations are also highlighted by some think tanks. These show that for their work, some think tanks have to develop key strategy. And for example, we have developing alliance by working with civil society action, developer platform, make a very important group of actors that can make a big action on advocacy. We have also leveraging neutrality, because if think tanks has partisan, they can't work. They can't work. They have to be neutral in the political context. And
just if you can close, because the time is over, but please, if you can.
Okay,
Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you.
But conclude.
Okay,
Yeah,
to conclude, I can say that to work in a difficult political context, think tanks must work with evidence. Their work must be evidence-driven. Evidence-driven, because if you don't have proof of what you are talking about, it will be very easy to make a barrier to your work. It's what I can say to end my talk. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ariel. Please, if you have like also questions for Ariel and the intervention, included in the chat, and we will make sure that we answer afterwards. Now I'm calling to David Antonian from APRI, the Applied Policy Research Institute of Armenia. Thank you.
Thank you, Estefania, and thanks everyone for being here. Yeah, our analysis from Opry mostly focused on how polarization impacts think tanks in small states, taking the case of Armenia and what could be done to mitigate those effects. And our findings mostly support the global findings, which point to the effect of polarization on the ability for think tanks to research and operate. In Armenia, all but 1 out of 8 respondents reported such an effect, so overwhelmingly so. And moreover, many think tanks reported that it was not easy for them to engage with members of different political affiliations or ideologies. All this aligns with the political context we see on the ground, both in Armenia and the region. So the most recent anti-government demonstrations we had earlier this year were marked by inflammatory and hostile rhetoric, all condemned by international watchdogs. And moreover, this increased polarization has been proven to be correlated with increased voter apathy and low turnout in Armenia, where the most recent parliamentary elections only achieved 48% turnout, and the city mayoral elections only 28% last year. In the political context, polarization can have an outsized impact on think tanks, particularly in small states like Armenia, where institutionalization is already a problem. But this poses a problem because think tanks can serve an overwhelmingly constructive role, particularly in small states, for promoting creative thinking, inclusive discussions, and strategic foresight that's often needed to deal with some of the problems that our countries face. And these usually manifest as 3 major challenges to think tank survival, which is limited access to government, compromised objectivity if the government decides that certain think tanks are more worth it than others, and lost neutral ground as a place for discussion among conflicting actors and controversial topics. Our recommendations for this are twofold, which is to enhance research capacity and diversity and enhance organizational capacity and funding. I know I'm running out of time, but for the main recommendations, you can read more into our report online. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. Yeah, I wish we could have more time, but hopefully in the end, well, everybody presents after. Please, now I'm calling to Brian Paniker from Ideas Malaysia, from the East and Southeast Asia sub-region.
Hi, thank you, Estefania. Thank you, everyone. So in the case of Ideas, when it comes to the political context, is firstly at Ideas, we are always optimistic in our mission to build a better Malaysia. So this optimism fuels our dedication to policy reforms, democratic governance, and a more inclusive economic growth, despite political challenges in Malaysia. So we acknowledge those challenges while being optimistic about the future. I think we had Ideas. We still take a very realistic view of the barriers when it comes to Malaysia's political landscape, such as political appointments, transparency issues, and also regular policy shifts. But rather than shying away from these, at Ideas, we tackle them directly with practical evidence-based solutions. And another thing that we at Ideas that we do is we also foster a lot of constructive dialogue sessions. We believe at the importance of holding dialogues, collaboration with both government and also other CSOs, regardless of ideological differences, just to push for policy reforms. And we have seen that how this willingness to engage reflects a belief that positive change is within reach. And at Ideas, we empower citizens and institutions. We've came out with political appointment trackers to track political appointees. We seek to actually empower Malaysians by providing transparent information. So this reflects a lot of optimistic belief that an informed public can actually hold the government to account. So to conclude, at Ideas, we maintain a balanced approach. We are optimistic about Malaysia's potential, yet we remain vigilant towards any setbacks when it comes to governance. So I think this nuanced stance allows Ideas to actually push forward while still staying grounded in the realities of the volatile political environment. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Brian. Please, if you have any thoughts, write it in the chat to Ryan or to anybody else who is intervening. Thank you. And to finish this political context section, I would like Dr. Adeline Nembo to speak on behalf of the NACFU Policy Institute from the Sub-Saharan Africa, Cameroon.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Okay, thank you. Hello to everyone. Our study carry on the Cameroon, the sub-Saharan African countries. Think tanks in Cameroon have the potential to drive meaningful changes. However, their effectiveness hinges on how well they engage with stakeholders. So despite their relative recent emergence, think tanks in Cameroon have made progress, especially utilizing social media to reach broader audiences. So our findings revealed that most think tanks in Cameroon were founded after 2010, primarily focusing on economic and educational policies. However, they face significant challenges, particularly in securing funding and building relationships with government and academic institutions. So most think tanks reported having a weak or no strong relationship with the government policy and academic institutions. This implies that there is a room for improvement in fostering stronger collaboration, which constitute a hindrance to their potential to impact policy effectiveness. Also, regarding the political landscape, majority of think tanks stated that political polarization affected their research capacity, reason why all interviewed think tanks were able to engage with people from different political affiliation. And regarding media, all think tanks reported they use social media platforms like Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn to disseminate research. So some policy recommendations were provided regarding these findings. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And now we're finishing with the political context. Like some of you have talked about how important relationships between the different actors of the ecosystems and are like for policy impact and for influencing, and also the balance that from Adias Malaysia also commented about being balanced in terms of how you manage those relationships. But we will continue with some more conclusions. I would like first like everybody to speak. So I will call now to talk about funding to Teglin Kwandikov from CAPS Unlock Central Asia, Kazakhstan.
Yep. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Okay,
Go
great.
on, Teglin.
Yeah, nice to be here with you and say a couple of words about funding issues, which we all around the world have, and in Central Asia especially. So think tanks community is pretty young, and funding is one of the main issue that we have. According to this survey, 60% of organizations rely on a project-based financing without any core funding. And most of this funding have very short term, so it is like from 6 months to maximum 2 years, which is not very good actually for the long-term planning and the development of comprehensive research programs. And more than that, it forces us to prioritize grant applications over impactful research, which is also not very good. So in order to mitigate it, more and more organizations engage in consulting services, around half of surveyed organizations. So a lot of them also depend on international development organizations or state grants, which is historically understandable. Most of the think tanks, they were actually born in the affiliation with the state institutions or universities. And however, around 40% have the international funding component and only 20 rely only on the domestic sources. But within the Central Asian political context is becoming very tricky because we have now in several countries the development of the so-called foreign agent law, which blames organizations for receiving international financial support. which not only creates, barriers for the operations, like, impact on your image and the ability to engage with the diverse stakeholders, but also it can lead to the suspension of your operations generally. So we tried to be creative. We searched for the new funding model, and yeah, we will see how it will work. Crowd sources actually also will work soon again for the political reasons, because there are some negative legislative developments too. Yeah.
Thank you, Telegen. Now we are going to call Irumi Pereira from the Center for a Smart Future from Colombo Urban Lab, Southern Asia, Sri Lanka.
Estefania, they said they are having some trouble with weather and their electricity today.
Thank you, Selenge. So now then the turn is from Javier Gonzalez from Metos LAC, Mexico. Javier, you have there you are.
Yes, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. And thank you for inviting us to present in this launch, where I'll go straight forward to the experience in Mexico regarding financing. And I should say first that this is not really a very optimistic picture. As you can say in the first figure, 83% of the think tanks that responded the survey see funding decreasing or remaining the same as compared to the previous year. 100% of the respondents see this high reliance on short-term and single source funding. This is important because most of the projects in Mexico are, the period of implementation are between 6 months and 1 year long. So it's very short. It's a very short period for them. 83% identify international agencies as the main source of funding. So this talks about a high dependence as well. And 30% believe that political polarization has impacted their ability to secure funding. So political polarization is impacting also this issue. This has important impacts, very concrete and direct impacts on our agendas in Mexico, because the agenda or the topics that we deal with are increasingly conditioned by the priorities of donors, and also this, as I was saying, the short-term funding. 83% consider that this that diversity is very important, precisely as a key indicator of the ability to create impact. So if we are not, we have not diversity in funding, we have less impact. We also see this effect in the reduction in long-term research flexibility. We are losing this flexibility in the long term. And we are looking also greater competition among the think tanks, which somehow jeopardizes the possibility to go together in some political agendas, for example. So just to finish, one recommendation could be to have more dialogue between donors and the government and the think tanks, so we can align our priorities and avoid misunderstandings about our objectives as independent organizations. Thank you.
Thank you, Javier. And now, please, Grupo Faro, Gabriela Suarez from Ecuador, Latin America.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you, OTT, for inviting us to the launch of the report. Yeah, so I'm just going to share some main fundings about not only Ecuador, it's actually about Latin America context of the think tanks. So I just wanted to share with you the main, just please wait a second, because I think, can you hear me now? Hello?
We can hear you, Gabriela.
Okay, sorry, so I'm just gonna, because I think I'm having trouble with the internet because of the electricity. Oy. I cannot hear you. Can you hear?
Yeah,
we can hear you.
We hear you, yeah. I think that something happened with Gabriela as well and her power light. Are you muted or is it something with the connection, Gabriela? I think that she left. Unfortunately, we have
some troubles with the electricity in Ecuador, as you know, and maybe she has the electricity cut right now. Yes.
Okay, thank you. No, thank you, Emily. And we will come back later, and probably I don't know if also in the person Irami is here or we shall continue with the next topic. But just to summarize, there like the discussion has been allowed around the term of the contracts and also about not only about the staff but also about the projects. There's a high reliance on short projects that goes from 6 months to 1 year, being 3 years the longest. Also, how political polarization is driving think tanks to compete among them, and also this affects the agenda in the case of Mexico, because they are not able to join efforts between think tanks to go together, and also every time the conditions and the agenda is done by or shaped by the donors' priorities. There is an importance, a need to talk to donors so that they can understand how their actions actually affect the think tank's sustainability. There is also a high reliance in international organizations, but especially in short terms and single sources funding. Now, to finish about like the topics and continue the conversation, we are going to talk about impact. And for this, I invite to talk Damien King from CAPRI, the Caribbean Policy Research Institute from Jamaica.
Thank you. You know, we're thinkers. What we would really like to do is to go into our tanks and think, which is gather the data, do the analysis, and come to the conclusions. And hopefully that would speak for itself. But that's not how it works. Everything else would be a distraction. And one of the, listening to these presentations and reading the State of the Sector report makes you realize that the intimate connection between the political context and the ability to have impact. Because one of the biggest obstacles to having impact is having to navigate the political context and what the political context will do to the pure work that you have done. And what the State of the Sector report revealed to us is how Caribbean think tanks operate in a privileged situation. You know, it struck us that we were one of only 11% of the think tanks that reported operating, completely independent of political influence. And we also noted that when we were asked about, when we looked at whether the political situation had any impact on the work over the last 12 months, we were able to report no impact anywhere in the Caribbean. And only 40% of the think tanks in the State of the Sector survey reported that. And looking ahead, when we were asked about, is it going to affect us in the future, we said no, even though next year is a year for general elections. And the point is that allows us to be able to focus on impact, to focus on communications. And so that's what we do. We devote half of our resources to communications and to advocacy, the same amount of resources that we do to the research. And so because of that, we're able to have a tremendous amount of impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Damien. The next person is Diatu from IPAR, from Senegal, Sub-Saharan Africa. Diatu, are you there? I think that.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we do.
Okay. I don't know if the video is on. Okay. So I would like to contribute in the discussion in terms of challenges of the think tanks in impacting policymakers in Africa. What we've seen is that think tanks in sub-Saharan Africa play a role, an important role in terms of shaping public policy and fostering societal debates. They serve as intermediaries, good intermediaries between policymakers and the data production sector, organizing public events and leveraging media to disseminate their findings. Despite all that, the significant contribution of the think tanks across the sub-Saharan Africa, including Senegal, where I'm based on, face critical challenges. Critical challenges that hinder
Sorry, go ahead. I think that it's muted now.
Okay. In Senegal, for example, think tanks operate in a politically somehow sensitive environment where addressing some controversial issues can lead to resistance. For instance, IPAR encountered strong opposition when highlighting inefficiencies in the agricultural subsidies, facing censorship and even threats. And this underscores the need for cautious, inclusive communication strategies when dealing with contentious topics. Additionally, institutional limitations such as insufficient resources, as already said, high staff turnover and a lack of expertise, hampered abilities of think tanks to conduct high quality research and influence data decision making effectively. Another major challenge is the difficulty of translating research into action while think tanks produce valuable insight. Ensuring these findings influence policies requires robust advocacy and communication strategies. So in conclusion, despite the challenges, think tanks in Senegal and across sub-Saharan Africa remain crucial for sustainable development informed public policy, but their continued empowerment is essential for addressing complex governance, economic, and environment issues in the region. Thank you.
Thanks, Datu. Please, Bilal Mali from the Policy Center for the New South, Morocco, in Mina.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Yes, okay, perfect. Yeah, I'm honored to discuss the key findings of impact, particularly focusing on insights from the MENA region. And yes, at the Policy Center for the New South, we have identified three main pillars for impactful work, which is adaptability, inclusivity, and engagement. And first of all, adaptability is essential, especially in a region as diverse as the MENA region, where political context and resources vary greatly. According to our analysis, we have found think tanks operating on a budget of less than 100,000, while others can access up to $5 million. So that's a big contrast between the think tanks. So this stark contrast requires smaller think tanks to continually innovate and adapt their strategies to maintain relevance despite the financial constraints. And second of all, the second point is inclusivity and leadership, which is another crucial factor, but the progress remains uneven in the MENA region, where we have only about 20% of think tanks with mixed gender leadership teams. And this figure points to a gradual shift towards more diversity, but yet it falls short compared to the global push for more inclusive leadership. And it has also an impact on the research that we conduct. And finally, engagement is fundamental to driving impact. Our data shows that 80% of MENA think tanks organize public events and 93% produce policy briefs, which are effective in reaching traditional audiences. However, only around 40% utilize social media as part of their outreach strategy. And this gap indicates a missed opportunity to expand the digital engagement, especially among younger demographics. And in summary, we think by focusing on adaptability, improving inclusivity, and enhancing digital engagement, think tanks in the MENA and beyond can effectively bridge research with action, providing policymakers with insights needed for informed decision-making. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Bilal. And now, please, Natida from Governance Action Hub, the Anglosphere in the United States.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. In our global analysis, we focus on the idea that think tanks must adapt innovative strategies to broaden impact in a divided landscape. And it's largely built off the state of the sector findings, a few which we wanted to include here. The first being that primary risks confronting think tanks stem from political context, and particularly in navigating political polarization. The second was that more than half of think tanks reported no impact in policy focus on issues that are particularly political or might affect special interests such as governance, environment, economics, or security. And the third being that self-reported policy influence is consistent across different types of countries and think tanks. These challenges altogether create a very complex and demanding environment, but they also underscore the importance of rethinking what influence really means. And so understanding the political environment is key, not just in navigating it, but also actioning ways to be a helpful force in ensuring that reforms are not only approved, but also effectively implemented. So in the space of think tanks, we often view impact as influencing policy, but for lasting change, this really requires a broader approach, one that involves sectors of society that drive reform outside of the government. So a few ideas that we have just played with is that think tanks can serve as platforms for dialogue. They can also be incubators for innovative ideas and pilot these ideas, and also a bridge across different perspectives, to name just a few. It's a shift that we believe requires localized engagement in order to tailor these different solutions and designs to specific contexts. But the point is that these approaches enable think tanks to mobilize support for reforms and create sustainable collaborative solutions, effectively extending think tank influence and increasing their impact globally. Thank you.
Thank you, Natida. And to finish with this section and try to close, Merlin from the Center for Study of Science, Technology and Policy in India, Southern Asia.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, please go ahead.
I had a whole presentation prepared, but I think the time is too short, so I won't go into that. I'm speaking about the impact part of it. A lot of what do think tanks consider as impact in India? 80% think media citations, 70% social media engagement, and the third is funding base and diversity of funds, which is a key indicator of impact. This is also reflected in where think tanks spend money. So a lot of money, budget resources, as well as people go into publishing reports and policy briefs that portray think tanks as experts, for media visibility, for maintaining the budget, and below that is intervening in the policy process. 90% of think tanks said that they were able to create impact from their policies in India in the last 5 years. Think tanks engage through both formal and informal means for engaging. 90% said they had engaged in formal means with policymakers, and 81% through informal means as well. Takeaways from some takeaways from the data: one, communication is growing exponentially. There's a lot of focus on comms related activities within think tanks so that they can kind of put their message out there and engage with people. Events are also a big way in which think tanks engage with the audience. Funding is a big challenge. Over the next 12 years, there is 36% of think tanks said that they predicted the situation to be unfavorable. In I think this also calls for strong MEL systems within think tanks, which is not so much, because even defining impact and finding out what is impact is also challenging in the think tank context. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Meline. And just before closing, there's a high correlation between the capacity of think tanks to navigate the political complexities and also an impact. There's a high investment and focus on communications and advocacy. It's not only about research, although think tanks might be focused on that, but also it's really important to adapt, to include, and also like the digital engagement, especially for youth. Because a lasting change has to go beyond influencing policies with a broader approach beyond the government. And I really like also the last interventions, like some clear indicators about impact, such as media citation, diversity of funds, and also how, like the fact of intervening in the policy process as an actor. And I don't know if Gabriela is here and somebody else that didn't intervene because of some complexities away their control. Are you still here, Gabriela, or somebody from Faro and somebody from Sri Lanka?
I'm here, Steffi from Faro. Emily?
Okay, so would you like to intervene?
Yes, as our subject was funding, we also worked on the blog for the state of report, the report of state. And the question you asked first, the access of funding for think tanks in Latin America is a very complex issue that affects not only our individual operations, but can also have consequences for the development of the entire sector. Many think tanks rely on combination of public and private funding, including donations from foundations, corporations, and governments. And in theory, it is most beneficial for us as think tanks to have diverse funding sources to ensure our operations, while also maintaining our independence and objectivity in our work. In that aspect, core funding allows us as organizations to have solid financial basis, ensuring that we can maintain daily operations, pay salaries, and cover overhead expenses. But also in Latin America, we have also this project-based funding that most of the time can cause us many limitations to our independence, especially in research, for example. As you know, FARO works in democracy, in research, and also working to contribute to democracy in our country. And sometimes some donors we have here in Ecuador, and I think it's also for the region, are always looking for some boundaries. And this is very dangerous for us as think tanks. Is one of the challenges we are facing right now in the region, and especially in Ecuador.
Thank you. Thank you, Emily. And also, we wanted you all to have the opportunity to talk. That's the purpose of this space. And we really thank you for the interventions and also for keeping the time. We know that it's not enough. We would like more time to continue discussing all these topics. And as you can see, these insights are crucial for better understanding the report's main findings. So we encourage you to keep on talking and discussing among your partners and also like within your local contexts. My colleague Salenge Dima, whom some of you well know because she was your counterpart and also contacted you for the blogs on different and many occasions, has shared information about the authors and the organizations in the chat. Please reach out. Please try to see if something resonated, like to keep on going with the discussion. Unfortunately, we don't have more time, but I would like to close just by asking you to share the report, to continue the discussion, and to do more analysis, to disagree. But that's the purpose of this input that we do. We appreciate and we thanks all our partners around the world for this, their invaluable support in this edition of the State of the Sector report. It's 21 partners around the world, but also founders such as Hewlett. And we ask you also to support the SOS report and the OTT directory, because in that way we can gain valuable evidence that will help you collaborate more effectively with the think tank sector, but also if you help us to have and reach out to more organizations, and we have like more representation of some sub-regions within the directory, and that will help also for the to the report. Thank you so much for your time. Please, if you have any questions, send it to us through the chat, and we will try to come back with you with some answers. I would like also to thank the outstanding OTT, also the professionals who contributed to this effort. Thank you and have a good day. And please, let's keep in touch. We will be with you also like in contact for your local launches and events and supporting them too. So thank you so much. Have a great day. Night.